Hey everyone, just popping in here. I was recently nominated for an AVN award for favorite adult podcast, and I'd really appreciate your vote. So if you can go to avn.com/awards/voting, you can cast your vote up to once per day up until January 7th. I'd really appreciate your support, and thank you so much for all the support along the way. Thanks. Are you a sex worker looking to build a new website or a website redesign? Then you'll want to consider Fox Digital. They did a fantastic job designing my website, Stripped by Sia. If you want your website done, mention that you're a listener of the show at foxdigital.design for 20% off. Tell them I sent ya. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Stripped by Sia, your podcast for strippers, sex workers, and all the fancy naked people in between. I am your host, Steph Sia, aka Kimchi. Still not on stage. It's okay. It's literally the holidays when this will be released. So just taking a bit of a break from stage, but stay tuned. Keep track on my IG when I'll be performing next, because I don't know when I'll be booked next. I am sorry. But in the meantime, you can catch me on OnlyFans. I am very active there, as well as, what else do I do? All the things. I do all the things, this podcast being one of them. And if you are brand new here, Stripped by Sia is a podcast dedicated to the destigmatization of sex work. So every week I bring on a different guest from different facets of the sex industry. Anyone who's behind the scenes in adult, creators, performers, talent, people that are on stage, etc. People and allies and organizations that are also aligned with us with their best beliefs in forward. Blech. I cannot talk this morning. I'm not going to edit that out. It is 7 a.m. my time right now. And this is the first human I'm talking to this morning. I apologize. And I also apologize if you hear some yelling in the background. My partner is watching FIFA. There is some games on, and this recording at the same time. So I apologize. And yeah, stumbling over my words. I'm sorry, you'll just have to deal with it for today. But with that being said, I just want to shout out to my lovely Patreon subscribers. Hello. I'm just going to give a quick shout out to those who are in the top tier and second tier of that platform here. So hello to Ted McGuire, brand new here. Selena Money, also brand new from a few weeks ago. You guys are brand new to that. Thank you so much for supporting, as well as Snoo all the way from Germany. We've got Jay Suncern and Arup Sarkar, who are here locally here in Vancouver, Canada, and Justin Erickson, not very far down, but from Vancouver, Washington. Thank you so much. As you all might know already, the new website is finally up, www.strippedbysia.com. That's where you can find all the episodes. I've made all the graphics. I was up all last night at the time of recording, trying to get everything done before December 1st. It is out. Please check it and enjoy. I will have lots more thoughtfully written summaries, more detailed on that. So check it out. Your money is going towards that. And the next project, hopefully maybe getting a new mic or something. But just know that your money is going somewhere useful. So thank you. And last but not least, two things, two places, things. Jesus, this can be a struggle this morning. We want to thank Skyhawk After Dark TV, which is an adult network for other like-minded podcasts and videocasts just like mine. So be sure to check them out. We've got some great people that have had on the show that also have podcasts on there as well. It's skyhawkafterdarktv.com. And last but not least, our sponsor, Fox Digital. That's where I got my website made. Please reach out to Anthony. I just interviewed him a few episodes ago. He is a great web designer, really great tips on if you are building your own website, if you do need a website made, check it out. You get 20% off if you email him. It is foxdigital.design. Whew, did that under 4 minutes with stumbling. I am proud of myself. Okay. The episode is not about all the things that I have to say in the beginning of the show. It is about sex positivity, and also talking about HSV. And if you don't know what HSV is, it's herpes simplex virus. And I am actually kind of shocked slash ashamed to say that I haven't done an episode at all dedicated to, I mean, the elephant in the room that we never talk about sometimes in adult. And that is, STIs, certain diseases and things we might contract doing the type of work that we do. And I don't know why it took me so long. We're 5 seasons in. I mean, there's so many like subjects under the sun that I can talk about, but this is something that has been on my mind, especially for the past season. I'm like, oh, I need to get someone on. We did have a couple listeners request for this person to come on to the show. So if you are familiar with safe.slut on Instagram slash TikTok, she is a very, very awesome meme generator and content creator in this sex positivity space. And I would love to welcome Trish, aka Safe Slut, onto the show today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so excited to have you here, and thanks for bearing with me for the past few minutes here trying to like talk this morning, but I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. We're going to have an hour dedicated to this very topic, and again, something that I've never talked about on the show, that I think is really, really important in terms of like your own personal health, your safety, and whatnot, especially for those who are listening, not just those who are in full service sex work, but just people in general. If you're having sex, you should probably listen to this episode in general. So I think it would be useful on that front for sure. But I've been babbling on, and I really don't feel like talking because I keep stumbling over my words. Trish, can I pass it over to you? And would you like to tell the audience who you are in your own words and terms?
Yeah. So I am Trisha, aka Safe Slut. I was diagnosed with genital herpes a little over 3 years ago. So when I got herpes, I realized there was so much social stigma surrounding the virus, when it's actually extremely common and not a big deal. So before I got herpes, so I'm a licensed esthetician and herbalist. So I make my own products and like tinctures, body, skincare stuff. So when I got herpes, I was like, well, let me make some products for myself for my outbreaks. So while doing that, I also was like going through the diagnosis and dealing with stigma and stuff. So I knew I wanted to start like an Instagram about it. It was more initially to help myself through the stigma and my diagnosis. But then it kind of turned into this big like sex positive thing because I was able to actually talk about things that I've always wanted to talk about. Because I've always been obsessed with sex and stuff like that, and wanting to like talk about slut shaming, which has been a huge part of my existence as a very like sex forward person. So I kind of did like the herbal side of things, like the witchy herbal stuff, and then also like memes. I'm also a writer, so like a lot of writing, content creation. So now I'm on like every social media platform you can think of because Instagram has banned me twice.
Yes.
So dealing with censorship. So I'm on
Mhm.
everything you can think of. Um, and as of almost a year ago, I started doing Patreon as well for writing and then also like my nudes and stuff to show that you're still really hot if you have herpes. And then now I do OnlyFans as well. So I also like gotten into the sex work realm. So yeah, also all the stuff. So very busy.
I love it. I know what you mean. Today is both of our days off. So thank you so much for just taking the time out of your busy
Yeah.
schedule. I understand completely.
Yes. It's like when we do the work we do, it's just like we're constantly working.
Constantly working, lack of sleep, we're always on the
Yeah.
phone, doing all the things.
Yeah.
So
All of
I
it.
get
Yeah.
your hustle.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I mean, we have a huge topic here to tackle today. I would love for you to kind of share your story in terms of like, and I guess in more detail because you kind of just like glossed over it right now. But yeah, if you want to share your story, feel free to open up in terms of like what happened 3 years ago, how you found out, any kind of backstory, I think would be appreciated.
Oh, there's a good backstory. So as I said, I got herpes a little over 3 years ago. So I went through a huge hoe phase in my, like, early 20s, as you do,
Didn't we all?
and as we all do, and but I, like, really wasn't educated on STIs at all, and I wasn't being, like, as safe as I could have been, but I actually, besides HPV, which everyone gets, I didn't get any STIs, which is, like, very, very lucky. But so towards like I was dating someone, was really sad over them, and then I started seeing someone else, was sad over them, so was just kind of like dealing with like some heartbreak stuff in 2019. So I it was Halloween night and my roommate and I were like party hopping. So by the time we got to the last party, we were three sheets to the wind and we saw this extremely hot man. Like he looked like a Greek god. Like he was beautiful. And we were so drunk that we were like, you know what? Like, let's just share him. Like we don't want to fight over him. So we
Yes.
literally
I love
so we
that.
literally yeah, we were just like, you know what? He was dressed as a fallen angel, which is like so funny. Um
I can just imagine.
but yeah. So we went up to him and we were like, "You're so hot, like, we both wanna suck your dick, like, we'll do it right now." And he just was like, "Okay." Um, so we both hooked up with him in, like, one of the rooms at this party. We didn't have, like, penetrative sex, but then whatever, like, we were at the party, like, all doing our thing, and then he was like, "When we go home, like, I wanna have sex with you." And I was like, "Okay." So we ended up having sex, just the 2 of us. My I don't know what my friend was probably just fell asleep, I don't know. And, we didn't use a condom, but I do wanna note that you can get herpes even when using condoms because it's transferred skin to skin, not through fluid. But obviously, it would make it more likely to happen if you're not using protection. Um, so it was, like, the most average sex I've ever had. It was, like, 2 minutes long, like, at night, and then in the morning we had sex again, and it was, like, very average, whatever, like, you know, and he ended up in the morning, I was like, "Well, I don't know who this person is, so let's, like, try to chat." And he ended up being, like, such a himbo, like, had nothing to say. I
Uh,
mean, but he was hot, so, I mean, if you're gonna get herpes, at least get it from someone who's, like, extremely beautiful. Um, so, yeah, so whatever, so he left, we didn't exchange numbers or anything, it was just sort of like, "Alright, see ya."
see, yeah, get
And, yeah, get out of my life, and, so then 3 days later, like, on the dot, I had my first outbreak. I didn't know what it was, so I had my roommates, like, look at my vulva. I had, like, this one tiny sore, like, kind of on the, like, hood of my clit,
Mhm.
and it was just, like, not a good spot to have it,
Oh, no.
and yeah, and so I also had, like, flu-like symptoms, but the funny thing was my roommate also started getting flu-like symptoms, which are both indicators of your first herpes outbreak.
Right.
She didn't have a sore though, but she did give him oral.
Mm.
So I ended up going to urgent care. I ended up getting diagnosed like on the spot. She just like looked at it and was like, "Yeah, like this is herpes." And I was like obviously devastated. Like I didn't leave my bed for days. I just like bawled my eyes out, but I also was kind of like, I deserve this. And kind of going through that shame of like I'm a very sexual person, like of course I'm gonna get this.
Right.
But so while I was dealing with that, my roommate was also sick, and so once I came home and was diagnosed, she was like, "Oh my god, I probably have it like on my mouth since like you got it." So
Right.
she ended up going to we had the same gynecologist. So she
Oh.
yeah, so she went to her gynecologist and kind of like told them what happened.
Yeah.
And then so I went in the next day to get my blood work done because they didn't do my blood work at urgent care.
Right.
And so I was like talking to the nurse, just like devastated and was kind of like, "Well, is herpes like super common?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, like we diagnose people all the time. We had someone yesterday who had a threesome with her roommate and they both got herpes." Like,
It's
and
like,
I was like,
oh, like,
and I just was like, and I was like, "Well, I was the other roommate." Like that
oh,
was me.
oh my god, it was
Because my roommate came in the day before and told them what happened.
yeah.
Um,
Oh my god.
and she was like, "Well, I appreciate your honesty." Um, but so my roommate ended up not getting it because the guy who gave it to me had HSV too, and although he didn't have an outbreak, but he was shedding, which means that he doesn't have any symptoms, but, he can still transmit the virus. It, like, happens, like, it the longer you have herpes, the less you shed, but it just happened to be one of those days that he was shedding.
Gotcha.
But since she didn't get it on her mouth is because he has HSV too, and HSV two rarely transfers orally. It can happen. It's just not as likely it really, like, slip genitally, whereas HSV one, usually is on the mouth,
Right.
but is very often transmitted generally through oral sex. Um,
Ah.
yeah, so yeah, it's
Oh,
very interesting virus. But so yeah, so which is like so yeah, so she didn't end up getting it, I got it, and then yeah, for days I was devastated, and I ended up talking to a friend who knew this guy, and she was like, "Oh, well, he used to date someone who had herpes, so I'm pretty sure like he has it and like knew." So he didn't disclose to me, which is unfortunate, which is why I'm a huge advocate for disclosing even if it's just a one night stand, even though it's unlikely it would transmit. It happened to me, so and I didn't get the choice. So always want to have people give people the choice.
absolutely.
But yeah, so it the first week was awful. I feel like I felt so alone, like I didn't know anyone else that had it until I started telling literally everyone I knew because I'm a Leo and that is what I do.
Yep.
And the more people I told, the more people were like, "Oh, me too. I've never told anyone," or
Yeah.
like, "Oh, this person has it that I know. Like they're totally fine." And then I started Safe Slut. The day I got diagnosed, I thought of the name Safe Slut. It just like popped into my head, like, "Oh, I have to be a
Oh.
safe slut now. I can't be like a slut. I have to be a safe slut." Um, and yeah, so I initially was anonymous on Safe Slut, and then a month later, I was like, "You know what? Let me post a photo of myself. Like the people who are following me like have it too. Like it's fine." And then like a month or so later, I posted a nude on my a censored nude on my personal Instagram account and was just like, "Hey, I have herpes. Follow Safe Slut." Um and it was really scary. It was so scary, but it was so worth it. The amount of people that I like were just acquaintances that were like, "Oh my god, I have it. I haven't told anyone. Like, thank you so much," and all these things. So it
That's
was, yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
thank you so much for sharing your story because I just feel like it is, I mean, the people that I know that have HSV2, that is very common in terms of like how they
mhm,
got it. Like
yeah,
my longtime partner before my now fiance, he also had HSV2 as well. And I remember like, and we were together for like 3 years, a long time. And I remember immediately, not immediately, probably a month after like I moved in and stuff, and we moved pretty quickly.
yeah,
Um, he sat me in his car, and I remember we had this conversation about, oh, I have herpes, and I just remembered what I was feeling. And of course, looking back at this now, how selfish it was in terms of thinking, be like, oh my gosh, like, am I going to get it? Like, am I still going to date him? And just like thinking me, instead of like, what is he thinking? And like for him to like come out and be respectful and also responsible for telling me that. Like, I just remember having the whole conversation and navigating through that relationship. But like, honestly, it was pretty normal in
yeah,
terms of like how to navigate a relationship when you have HSV. But we'll definitely go into that conversation a little bit later on in the episode too. But I really like your approach in terms of like how transparent you are, because again, like, so many people have it and there is so much shame that is around HSV, or in general pretty much STIs as a
mhm.
whole. So I'm really glad that you're able to have this conversation and have people resonate with you and bring people together and build that type of community too, because no one ever talks about
Yeah, no, because honestly, it's like it's no one's fault, and like it's not your fault that you felt the way you did when your ex partner disclosed to you because I know you're in Canada, but, like, I'm assuming our sex ed was very similar where it's like we didn't really have too much of it, and it was
Yeah.
very sex negative where we're kind of taught I also grew up Catholic, so we're,
Mhm,
like,
me too.
taught Yeah, so yeah, we very similar where it's like you are supposed to reject people like me, and then it's like really bad, and it kind of promotes the shame and like fear mongering. So it's and we also weren't educated on like how herpes really works. Like a lot of people don't know that cold sores are herpes or that you're not tested for it on the STI panel, usually. So it's kind of it's no one's fault, but at this point, like, we need to start, like, obviously being accountable as we get older for our sexual health, but yeah, it's a learning process, like it was for me, like, I didn't know anything until I got it, so
Definitely, and, like, going back to that topic of, like, sex ed back when I was, like, in grade 6 and, like, 11 years old, it literally was just popping in a video, and you just watch, and there was no discussion, like, and the girls and the boys were separated, and we
Mhm.
yeah, we had to, like,
Yeah.
watch these different videos and stuff too, and then I don't even remember us having a conversation about this at all when I went to high school because I went to private Catholic school, and you're not supposed to have sex before marriage.
Yeah.
That was never a
They're
thing.
like, "You don't need sex ed because 'cause you're not having sex."
Yeah, how wrong
Yeah,
is that?
yeah, so I went to public school, but I went to CCD. And we watched a video in CCD about, like, not drinking, not doing drugs, not having sex, and, like, there was one little clip of, like it was, like, a couple on their wedding night, and, like, the wife had, like, a dirty shoe, and he had a clean shoe, and he was like, "Oh my god, the entire football team has, like, walked in your shoes, like, it's dirty." And, like, to be like, she's had sex with the whole team, and, like,
Wow.
it's just so laughable, like, even watching it at that age, like, everyone in the class was like, yeah, you know? Like, it's a joke. It's like, as much as you wanna tell teens to not have sex, like, they're going to do it, so you might as well give them the right tools,
Oh,
you
100%.
know? Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like we should have probably and this is my mistake, but, like, for anyone who's wondering in terms of, like, what is HSV? What is herpes simplex virus? Maybe we can kind of go into some general information about the virus, like, what is it? I know you kind of went really briefly in terms of, like, how it might be contracted and the difference between 1 and 2, but for anyone listening that is like this information is just kind of going over her head, maybe we can just take a step back and
Yeah.
define all these things.
Herpes 101,
Yeah,
yeah.
herpes 101.
Yeah, so herpes is a virus of the nervous system. So there's 2 strains, HSV-1, HSV-2. There's also there's a lot of different viruses in the herpes family. So like chickenpox, mono, shingles, that's all herpes.
Oh,
Most people don't know. Yeah, so
yeah,
it's like mono when you get it, it's like it's in your body forever. But again, like there's no like symptoms of it. It's just like a virus that you have, like you have, and you have the antibodies for it. But the usual ones that show up like genitally or on the mouth, so like cold sores is HSV-1 or HSV-2. HSV-1 is usually cold sores, so pops up on the mouth. But more more and more because people are engaging in oral sex more, which we love.
mhm.
Um, it can be transmitted to the genitals through oral sex. So um, even if you don't have a cold sore present, you can still transmit it because of when you shed, and you don't know when you're shedding. So it's I mean, with anyone, it's always a risk. So, like, even if you got cold sores as a little kid, that's still herpes, and even if you didn't get it sexually, it can still transmit during sex, which kind of shows, like, how shameful and sex negative our society is, where it's like, if you got it as a kid, like, it's kind of like, "Oh, I get cold sores as a kid, it's a little bit different," but, like, when you have it generally, it's way more stigmatized solely because we did get it through sex and because it lives on our genitals, which is, like, so silly, and it kind of
Yeah,
shows how it's just the stigma itself because it's the same virus, just in a different location.
totally.
And then HSV-2 usually lives genitally. It can transmit orally, but as I said before, it's very rare. It just doesn't really happen.
Mhm.
But again, like if you have any symptoms, if you're having an outbreak or if you're having prodromes, which is symptoms before you get an outbreak, like I get like nerve pain in my leg. You're
Mm,
obviously going to want to avoid sex or using that area. There's other things you can do, of course.
totally.
But yeah, so it's very common. It's like over 1 in 6 people in the US have genital herpes, but since it's not tested for on the STI panel, most people who have it don't even know they have it because it is asymptomatic and they've never been tested. I think it's like over like 85% of people don't know.
That's
So,
crazy.
yeah, so it's like literally like honestly, like you can assume that like more people have herpes than not. And like with HSV1, like it's like over two-thirds of the world population gets cold
Oh,
sores.
yeah.
So it's like a joke. Like it's like that's why like whenever I'm like doing like support calls or something, like I and like just try to like put things into perspective. Because after you have the facts, you're kind of like, oh wait, really? Like this is it?
Yeah.
It's just like the way like society and like yeah, our sex ed makes STIs out to be, but like herpes is just it's everywhere.
I
It's
know.
unavoidable.
I know, because like I remember like talking about it too. I think it was in high school. I think it was not like in school, but like talking with my peers about it because obviously that was like a scare, a
Mhm,
potential scare. Like, oh, if you get it, then you're gonna get it for life, and like
mhm.
it's the fear mongering aspect of it.
Yeah,
And then
right.
like you could spread. It's super contagious too. With
Yeah,
your
people think that you're always contagious. Like
yeah,
I've had herpes for 3 years. I've had a fair amount of sexual partners, and I, to my knowledge, haven't transmitted to anyone. Like, it's safer to sleep with someone with herpes and knows their status than someone who doesn't, because we're
yes,
more aware of what's going on in our body. Maybe we take antivirals. We're having those conversations about sexual health, whereas, like, if you're just, like, with someone who doesn't know their status, they could be, like, yeah, transmitting it and not even knowing, you know?
yeah, and that's a scary part too, because that's basically I think that's how my ex got contracted with it too. Like he was also going through a hoe phase too, and just like sleeping with randos. And I mean, we all have. There's nothing wrong with that. Sex is
Mhm.
great.
Yeah, yeah.
And then yeah, then he ended up contracting it. But I remember like when he first had that conversation with me, I was also thinking that way too, like, "Oh my gosh, like, am I when am I gonna get it? And, like, is it gonna be like, we've been having sex, like, is this gonna be an issue?" And I remember him telling me, "Yes, you are not contagious all the time." And he knew when he was kind of getting the symptoms, when he was about to have an outbreak and whatnot. And although mine is different because I have HSV1, like I get cold sores, and mainly when it's super sunny and I'm in a tropical destination, and basically like I have too much sun exposure, then I break out in cold sores and whatnot. But I can also tell when that's going to happen, and usually like for me personally, like stress is another thing that might trigger that
That's, like,
onset.
the number one trigger for everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, like,
yeah.
let's kind of go into, like, symptoms, but I know, as you mentioned with that term shedding, like, you just don't know when that is too, so it's like, let's talk about symptoms, some telltale signs, although I know probably people might be different, but maybe
Yeah, so that's the thing that's hard is, like, everyone's prodrome symptoms or even what their outbreak looks like is gonna be different. Um, but that's why when you get your first outbreak, usually, like, it's gonna pop up in the same location. It can move around because, it can just pop up in the genital region, but usually it will pop up in the same location. But it's good to like know your triggers and then also what yours looks like, so what your symptoms are. For me, I don't really get outbreaks anymore. I actually have one right now because I'm very stressed.
oh,
But I had like nerve pain all the way down my leg for a couple days, and I was kind of like, "Oh, I'm probably getting an outbreak." And usually I'll take Valtrex, but I just like didn't because I just didn't feel like it. But
yes, Valtrex.
yeah, yeah, love her. Um, yeah, so for your first outbreak, usually people will get flu-like symptoms, like they'll get like swollen lymph nodes in their groin, flu-like symptoms, maybe a headache, just like kind of tired, maybe that nerve pain. Or they might just feel like really itchy in the area. They might notice like some redness on the skin, and then either like a day or so later, then that's when the outbreak will pop up. And for some people, maybe it's like one sore, maybe it's like a bunch of them. Sometimes it looks like a paper cut. Like there's so many different things. So that's why it's like if you're unsure, go get swabbed at the doctor because herpes doesn't always look like what you saw in textbooks growing up, where it's just like like swarms of outbreaks all over your genitals, which some people unfortunately do have like really intense ones, but for
Right.
the most part, like mine's just like one sore usually. And that's usually standard for symptomatic people is just like one or two sores that if you didn't know you have it, you might just ignore it and not even have noticed it.
Yeah, totally.
So definitely something to think about. But yeah, but everyone's gonna be different.
Yeah, I
So
mean, genitally speaking, I mean, you've definitely talked about that. For those who get cold sores on the mouth, like for myself personally, I usually a couple days before I'll get redness and my lip will kind of start swelling. I mean, it looks great, but like it's
yeah, you're like, ooh, lip filler.
yeah, like,
Pretty.
this is great.
Yeah.
But for me, like, I kind of get, like, a tingly sensation. I can't really, like, describe it, but then I'll kind of feel, like, a bit of hardened skin, where the cold sore might be forming, and then usually if I'm not taking Valtrex, and if you don't know what Valtrex is, it's an ov well, it's an over the counter? I don't think it's over the counter, I think it's a
No, you
prescription
need a
for it.
prescription for
Yeah.
it, but usually you can just call your doctor and be like, "Yo, I have herpes," and they'll
Yeah.
usually just yeah,
Exactly, and that
yeah.
works for me. It's like not an over the counter, but prescription medication that you can take. At least I take it orally in the form of pills, and for me that works so much faster than using what the hell are those
Like
creams?
a Breva
Yeah,
or
Abreva and
yeah.
stuff too. I feel like it's a lot more effective,
Mhm.
personally speaking, and it's just like a godsend.
Yeah, 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 I do like a mix of, like, natural and Valtrex. I like
Cool.
a little bit of both because I also like, I make my own stuff, so I'm just
Yeah,
like yeah, I like using it. Um, but yeah, we love Valtrex. She gets the job done.
the best. The
Yeah,
best.
yeah.
I know you mentioned it earlier too, but like what how do you test for this since it's not usually on like standard STI tests? Like and that's something I didn't really know about. Like
Yeah,
geez,
yeah, yeah, I felt the same way when I, like, didn't know that I wasn't tested for it, I was like, "Wait, what the fuck?"
yeah, seriously.
Yeah, it's like you're like, "Wait, what?" But, so there's 2 main ways to get tested for herpes. If you have symptoms, they're gonna swab you, um, and then you can also do a blood test, an IgG blood test, that will test for antibodies. It also will determine which type you have, which
Right.
is cool to know. I don't think it's, like, super important, but I mean, it's best to know, but,
Mhm,
um,
yeah.
you know, but when you first get herpes and you get an outbreak, there's a chance that your IgG will come back negative because you haven't had that time to build up the antibodies, so it's not gonna show up on a test yet. So
Oh,
it can take up to, like, 3-ish months to show up, which is why it's har like, testing can be kind of, weird and wonky because there's also some like, false positives, false negatives. The test isn't super reliable, which is a main reason why they don't include it on the STI panel, because
oh,
it's, like, it's not super 100%, which I'm kind of like, why not? Like, fix it.
yeah.
Um, you're a doctor, like, just do it. So there's that, and then also they're like, so many people have it. They're like and they're usually asymptomatic, so they're like, "Let's just," there's no for the most part, there's no real health risk with having herpes. So they're like, it's not really necessary. It's not like if it's not like gonorrhea or chlamydia where if it goes untreated, like it can really wreak havoc on your reproductive system and other things. But and then the last reason why they don't include it is because since it's usually asymptomatic, they know that the psychological aspect of having a herpes diagnosis can be really harmful. So they don't want to like scare people if they're not symptomatic, which I think is kind of morally wrong.
Yeah, isn't that kind of backwards though?
It's a
Like
little backwards because it's just kind of it's perpetuating stigma.
yeah,
Because 'Cause I'm
yeah.
like, if everyone got tested for it and knew that they had it, then there wouldn't be stigma. But the reason why I understand is, like, because of those false positive and negatives, like, that it's, like, not 100%. So that's where that makes sense, but it's unfortunate because I just wish everyone knew their status because people would be like, "Cool, we all have herpes, not a big deal."
Yeah, and they would just be treated at like it's like it's a non-issue.
Yeah, it should be like, "Oh, I have a
Mhm.
cold right now," kinda thing, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm,
exactly. Jeez, I mean, like, that's really frustrating to hear that. I
mhm,
had no idea in regards to the testing portion of it and how
mhm.
how inaccurate
Yeah,
that could be,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Jeez. I mean, with that being said, and this might be a general question in terms of like getting tested, but like a lot of times people are like, well, how often should you get tested? And like, for those who are in, say, in porn and stuff, we do get tested all the time. But of course, there can be some of that time where a virus might be brewing and you're testing negative too. So I feel like it's necessary to have this conversation. But like, on the topic of testing, how often should people be getting tested? And this might be a no-brainer for some, but again, for those who are listening, that this is a fairly new topic. Let's just like dive into it.
Yeah. My thing is like if I have a new partner, like a one night stand, like I'm gonna get tested after them, just, you know. But I would wait 3 weeks before I'll get tested after that partner because it takes with any STI, it's gonna take either like a couple of weeks, a couple of months to show up. Like HIV and herpes is like up to 3 months ish usually. Gonorrhea and chlamydia I think is like 1 to 3 weeks. So there's like a window period. But usually a good rule of thumb is like every 3 months if you're like sexually active um with like various people. Um, I feel like some people like to go above and beyond and just do like after each partner, like every single time, which I think is great. If you have the accessibility to it and like your insurance covers it, yeah, definitely do it. But I know like it can be really hard for people to find it with if they don't have insurance, like finding it like at a reasonable price. Because
Totally.
also the other thing with herpes, it's a really expensive test. My
Mm.
insurance should have covered it, but when I got diagnosed, for some reason it didn't, and I owed like $2,000.
What?
And I was like, yeah, yeah.
Oh my
And I was like,
gosh.
fuck this. I'm not paying this. I was like, I'm gonna send this to the guy that gave it to me. But I just ignored it and it went to a debt collector and now it's just gone. I don't know what happened. So just ignore your medical bills. That's my professional opinion.
That's hilarious. I mean,
Yeah.
for a lot of us Canadian listeners, we get free healthcare.
Yeah, free, yeah. So yeah, it's probably easier. Yeah, it's hard out here.
Yeah, I
Yeah, luckily
didn't
I'm
realize
on Medicaid or Medicare, I forget which one it is. But yeah, so I have everything for free too, which is great.
that. Nice.
But yeah, it can be really, really hard. But yeah, I know like in the porn industry, so I haven't done porn yet, but I have an agent that like I might in the future. But we were talking,
Ooh,
yeah, I know.
yes.
Um, yeah, but I think yeah, we can talk about that later. Um, but we were talking about herpes because he was like, your OnlyFans name is Herpes Witch, and I was like, yeah, and I was telling him like the work that I do, and he was like, oh, okay, I get it. And he was like, most people don't like advertise that in the porn industry, and he was like, but like pretty like it's just kind of like an assume that you kind of have it
Mm,
in the porn industry, and I know like
interesting.
you don't, yeah, like you don't really, and I've talked to other sex workers like they're like, you don't disclose it. You get tested before you do a scene, but you're not testing for herpes. They just kind of assume you have it. If you have an outbreak, then you just wait till it's gone and then you
Yeah,
then you do the scene kind of thing, which I think is nice that that's how it
it
is in
works.
the industry because it just sort of like, yeah, we're adults, we have herpes, like
Yeah.
move on. I don't know. So
I mean, it should just be treated as such, though. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's really cool. I mean, like, did your agent have any like hesitations about that at all, or no? It's just
No, not at all. He was just saying that he's worked with like he was just kind of going like on a tangent that like he's worked with, like, younger because I'm 28, so he's like, "When I work with girls who are, like, 18, 19, and they get their first herpes outbreak, one that like, if they, like, got it from, like, a performer or even just in general, they, like, freak out because 'cause they're like, 'Oh, I can't work. I can't do this, like, my life is over,' and then he has to, like, explain to them, like, how it works."
yeah,
So he was really great, so that's why I'm glad he, like, understood, but he
yeah.
was like, "Maybe don't, like" we were talking about I was potentially gonna go to, that expo,
Oh, yeah.
Exotica or whatever.
Exotica was, yeah, and then Expo
Yeah.
in January as well too.
Yeah, I did end up going, but he was like, "If you go, like, bring your business card," but he was like, "But maybe don't advertise that you're, like, the herpes witch."
Could be your
And
alter
I was like, "Okay."
ego.
Yeah, yeah.
That's cool. I mean, like, going along with that conversation of, like, "Oh, I can't work anymore," too, because like, a lot of people might think this might affect their sex work
Mhm.
or for those who are just having sex who are not in the industry, like, "Oh my gosh, I can't have sex anymore." That's not true.
Not
That's
true. That
not
was what I thought too. Initially, I was like, "Oh my god, I can never have sex again," but it's, like, literally, like, not true at all, and it's funny because I, like, in my early 20s, I was like, "Oh my god, I really wanna be a porn star," like, I've like,
Yeah.
really into it, and then when I got herpes, I was like, "No, I can't do porn." And now it's funny that I'm actually, like, introduced to doing it kind of because I got herpes, so it was, like, kind of like a cute full circle thing.
That's awesome.
But yeah, you can still do porn, you can still have sex, you can still be a hoe if you have herpes, like,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad we're having this conversation because it's really, really important, and some people who are listening, might have it too and might be going through this, or maybe they just got their first outbreak too, but tell us, how you were able to kind of cope and deal with it, because I know you felt very isolated. You felt really alone, and no one was talking about it. No one ever talks about it because it's deemed as quote unquote private
Mhm.
information.
Yeah, people are embarrassed.
Yeah, tell us about.
Yeah. So I ended up having 2 really close people in my life that I didn't know that had it end up having it, and so seeing that they were both in long-term relationships, I was like, "Okay, I feel." This was, like, 3 days in, I was like, "Okay, I feel better," like, they were both of them were like, "You can still," like, one of them was in a really long-term relationship and was like, "It's fine. I've never had another outbreak. It hasn't been a problem, whatever." And then the other person was like, "I've had sex with, like, over 100 people since. It's fine. No one cares." And I was like, "Wow." And then I realized, like, looking on, because I obviously, like, went to Instagram immediately after I got it and found all these great, herpes advocates,
Nice.
and a lot of them were like, "You can still be in a relationship, you can still find love," and I was like, "Cool, cool, cool, but can I still fuck around? Like, I'm 25, I still wanna be a hoe.
Yeah.
Can I still do that?" So that was kind of a huge inspiration for why I wanted to start Safe Sex. I wanted to talk about how you can still do that and you can do it in a safer way.
Mhm.
It's all about that informed consent.
Yes.
And, so kind of honestly, like, yeah, talking to, like, more friends and family about it, um, and then starting Instagram, just really, it was mainly Instagram, just, like, finding a community of people who also had it, and we could just kind of, like, support each other. So, honestly, yeah, the internet saved my life.
Yeah, and the internet is a great place
Yeah, I love it.
for lots of reasons,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
also a terrible place for
Yeah,
lots
and
of.
also, like, really scary.
Yeah.
Like, not good at all.
2 extremes.
Yeah, yeah.
Going off on informed consent, I feel like this is a really good portion of the show to talk about that. When you first okay, so you had your first outbreak, you were at home and you're just like, "Oh, like this sucks. I don't know if I could be hoe anymore," all this stuff. When you did have the information, the resources, and you felt comfortable, like, okay, this is great, and I want to have sex again. What did the conversation look with that first partner that you had sex with after you've been diagnosed with HSV?
Mhm. Well, the first person I disclosed to ghosted me.
Oh,
Um,
shit.
so I love that, but
No.
it was, like, a longer story. So this was someone that I hooked up with a year before,
Hmm.
and then we, like, kind of rekindled, and I was like, "Just FYI, like, I have herpes now," and I sent this, like, really long explanation, and he was like, "Oh, no worries, my ex-girlfriend had it, like, I totally get it." So I was like, "Okay, cool." So day of comes where we're gonna hook up, and I don't hear from him, and then I, like, responded like, "Are you ghosting me because I have herpes? Like, if so, like, that's really hot." Then he never responded to me, but I ghosted him a year before, so I was like, "Maybe this is just, like, him being like, 'Fuck you, I'm gonna ghost you now.'"
Maybe
Um,
it is.
and, like, I don't know if it could be herpes, it could have been something else because, like, he did date someone who had it before and was fine with it.
Right.
So, you never know. So I honestly wasn't too upset, especially because it was just a hookup.
Yeah.
But the first time I had sex was actually, like, really cute. So it was, just, like, a mutual friend of a friend, and we were at a punk show, and I obviously got drunk, and, like, all I did was talk about how I had herpes, like, all night. And he was like, "Oh, I have someone really close to me that just got diagnosed too, like, I know all about it," and, like, I was like, "Ooh, hot." And so then we, went home and hooked up, and it was like I it was the first time I had sex in so long because of the diagnosis. So
Yeah.
we just, like, did everything, like, it was just, like, unhinged. Um, and then in the morning, I obviously was like, "Oh, I feel kind of, like, nervous about it," and so I texted him, and I was like, "How are you feeling about it?" And he was like, I'm just more concerned with, like, getting to work on time than I am about getting herpes." And I was like, "Ugh,
Wow.
that was really sweet."
Yes.
So yeah, so that was a really easy conversation because it wasn't like I was disclosing to him to have sex with him, it was just like I was just, like, talking about it, and then we ended up hooking up.
Mhm.
But in terms of just, like, disclosure in general, it's funny because the conversation I have is just the conversation I should have been having before I got herpes. Like, you should always
Yes,
talk to your partners about sexual health before you have sex. So
absolutely.
I always just, like, start the conversation by asking them when they've been tested last and, like, what that looks like, because
Hmm.
it's gonna be really telling with how they respond to it, like, because their sexual health also is important. Like, if they haven't been tested in a while, like, I'm not gonna sleep with them. Like, just because I have an STI doesn't mean, like,
Yeah,
I'm just like the you know? Um,
yeah,
so
definitely.
yeah, so it's a nice it makes it like a more like open conversation as opposed than it just like me disclosing. It's like we're both having this just like open
Mhm.
conversation.
I
And I just
like
like say it really casually. Yeah, I feel like most of the time people already know because like if they Google me before, they're gonna see it.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah,
one good thing about having a
yeah,
platform. It's just like,
yeah. They can already do the research before, and then I'm like, okay, cool.
well, yeah, I mean, going back to like, starting out the conversation with like, when was the last time you got tested? A lot of people, when I was still like having multiple partners back in my 20s as well, um, yes, that's usually how we had conversations too. At least the responsible ones had those conversations.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I mean, I've also been the irresponsible one too on the other side too, and be like, oh well, yeah, maybe I should get tested, and those conversations actually like sparking like, oh, this is a reminder, be
Yeah,
responsible, hoe.
yeah. Be a safe slut.
Yeah, be a safe slut
Yeah,
for sure. Because I mean, that's the only thing too, because like you never consented to any of this,
right.
and
Exactly.
yeah, that's definitely an intrusion for sure.
Yeah, that's why it's so important, like, yeah, even if it's just a one night stand, like, have those conversations, like, there's doctors that will tell you, like, don't disclose until it's, like, a serious thing or, like, you really wanna date someone, like, I've had so many people message me that that's what their doctor told them, and, like,
Well,
again, I disagree, I get their reasoning where they're like, "It's just everyone has it, it's probably gonna be asymptomatic if they do," like, you know? But since I got it from a one night stand, I'm very adamant about always disclosing because, like, you
yeah,
should give someone the choice about their health, like,
absolutely.
you know?
Oh my
It's like a
god.
no-brainer for me, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about like all the positive things that have happened, but have you ever had any pushback at all? Or yeah, if people ghosting for that, or people saying
Yeah,
awful
yeah,
shit?
yeah, I mean, I definitely obviously get trolls all the time on, like, Instagram and TikTok, but
Yes.
again, if you look at the people who are saying it and, like, posting, like, mean things, like, if you look at them, like, they're always just, like, trolls, they're always just, like, gross old men or just, like, little incels, so I'm just like, "Trust me,
Yes.
like, it's not affecting me."
Yeah.
Of course, it's not great to see, and, like, I don't want like, if they comment on my page, I usually just delete it because I don't want people who are struggling with their diagnosis to see that and think
Yeah.
that that's how the majority of people feel because it's just not true.
Yeah.
And and I've definitely been rejected a couple of times. It's more often than not that I'm not getting rejected. Because after you educate someone, it's kind of like, oh, really? That's it. Um, the last time I did get rejected, I was dating this guy for a couple months, and he didn't disclose to me that he got cold sores until after I disclosed to him that I had herpes, like genital herpes.
Uh,
And so we were having sex, whatever, but then I realized he wasn't going down on me, and I was like this was like, I think a month in, and I was kind of like, "Hey, like, what's going on here?"
yeah.
And he was like, "I don't wanna get herpes on my mouth." And I was like, "You already have it, like, you
Yeah.
already have herpes, you already get cold sores." It's like and again, they're different
Wow.
strains,
Yeah.
but at the same time, it's like he wouldn't have known the difference if he got a cold sore that was an HSV-1 cold sore, an HSV-2 cold sore. And I also explained to him that, like, HSV-2 doesn't really transmit orally. So
Mhm.
it wasn't that, like, I got rejected, it was more being like, "We're done here,"
Yeah.
because it's like you were okay with having sex with me,
Yeah.
even though you could get it on your dick even when we're using condoms. So your pleasure, you'll take the risk, but when it comes to my pleasure only, like, you're not gonna do it, like, literally, fuck
No.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Good for you, 'cause
yeah,
that's really annoying. I mean, do you find that most people are just uneducated about HSV in general?
yeah. That's more it. It's more like the lack of education, because once people are educated, then it's usually not an issue because 'cause they're like, "Oh, okay, that's it." Um, but again and it's like, it's not their fault to a degree because we weren't taught this, and, like, no one a lot of people don't wanna talk about it, which is why I'm talking about it.
Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, like as adults, you should be responsible and looking into your own personal health and
Mhm,
hygiene and stuff as well.
mhm.
So I feel like using that excuse only is a bit of a cop out. And I just feel it's can be potentially very dangerous.
It's dangerous and just, like, it's also very selfish. I was talking to a friend who has it, and she was saying that, like, she was dating a guy who hasn't been tested in a while, but doesn't wanna have sex with her because he doesn't wanna risk it. And it's like the men, and I'm saying men here because it's usually cis men who are doing this,
Usually. Yeah, sorry.
um, is they don't wanna use protection, they just wanna have unprotected sex, and they don't wanna have any accountability when it's like, you're being more unsafe than, like, someone who has herpes. Like, we're doing the work of, like, disclosing and talking about safer sex when it's like, you don't even get tested, but because you don't have symptoms, you think you're clean. Which
Mhm.
I'm using that in quotations because that is what they say, and that is not what you should be saying when you're talking about STIs.
Yes.
Um, and so it's just, like, laziness and selfish.
Very much
Yeah,
so. I
yeah.
mean, I'm curious too, and I don't know if you'll have the information because you don't have the lived experience for it, but for like those who are listening and those who are full service sex workers and living with HSV, and clients being worried about that, like, is that something? And this is just a general question in terms of like your opinion, because I don't know if you would know, but do you think that is that something you should disclose right on your booking website, or something you should have that conversation with before they book and whatnot? Like, how would you navigate that?
So I've talked to a few sex workers who I know that have herpes and got their opinion. And then I've also had a bunch of sex workers who are newly diagnosed, like, ask me, and I kind of tell them what the full service sex workers say because, like, again, like, it's not my place to say since I'm not doing that.
Yeah, yeah,
But they're usually like, again, it's kind of like the porn industry where it's like you kind of assume you have it, so it's not, you don't really talk about it. So it's either kind of like you don't disclose it, which again, like, you guys, everyone knows how I feel about not disclosing, but again, it is what it is in those situations. And then there's people who it's like after you vet your client, then you kind of have that conversation because again, even though it's like a service, like, it's still sex, so you
yeah,
can still have those conversations both ways.
yeah,
So I feel like I've I've heard both where it's like, yes, disclose after you vetted them, like, maybe don't, like, put it on your website.
yeah,
That would be my, if I have, like, any, like, say in it, that's what I would choose is, like, after you vet them, then have that conversation.
yeah.
Again, there's gonna run the risk of maybe losing a client, because of it, but,
Mm.
which is unfortunate because it's like, they
Yeah,
probably have it too, you know? That's why it's
yeah.
frustrating. So I see both, again, I see both sides of what that would be like.
Yeah, and that can be tricky, but I think that would be definitely up to their discretion, in terms of like I guess the timing of it all, when you would
Mhm.
disclose that too, because not a lot of people would be, "This is part of my brand," like, you know?
Yeah, most people aren't doing that. Yeah.
Most people aren't doing that, but
Yeah.
I'm just what I'm trying to say here is that there are responsible ways of doing that, and that might just come down to, like, timing, when you want to have that conversation, and as mentioned before too, you're only, like, when you're having outbreaks, that's when, or when you're shedding, that's when you can transmit it, so, yeah, just be responsible out there.
Yeah, do the best you can. I mean, that's the thing with sex, there's no such thing as, like, safe sex, there's only safer sex because there's always gonna be a risk no matter what, no matter how safe you are if you're using protection, like, you can still get herpes and HPV. Um, Again, most people have cold sores, so that can transmit. Like, it's just there's so many, like, variables, so there's no way to be completely, like, safe, risk-free. There's always a risk.
There's always a risk, exactly,
Yeah,
and going into any kind of adult work, there's always a risk, right?
right,
So
right. It's part of the job, like, that's one of the, yeah.
expectations.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Well, there were a couple questions that came in from the audience, that we can probably go into at this point in the conversation. Let's read the one here from Twitter. I'm just going to pull up my phone because I forgot to write it out because I am silly like that. This one came from Vancouver guy. A question I always ponder, and we kind of went over this a little bit. But for those that are active, multiple slash new partners, how often should we be getting tested, and for what?
So yeah, so like as we said before, if you're like really whole phase like going for it, like I personally would do after every partner, but just keeping in mind with that window period for STIs. Um, you can ask, so when you can be like, I want to get tested for everything, and then you're gonna get the standard, like HIV, gonorrhea, chlamydia, syphilis, usually hepatitis C, and then sometimes like I don't even know how to say the whole thing, trichonum,
Yeah, I
whatever,
know what you're
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
yeah, that one. Usually that's actually been included a lot, which cool, great. It's also not necessarily an STI as well. It's one of those like it can be whatever. Um, so that is the standard. You can ask for a herpes test as well. They might say no to you if you don't have any symptoms. But if it's like a good doctor, like they'll assess your level of risk and by asking you how many partners you're having, how often, whatnot. So like if you are having multiple partners and whatever, there's a chance that they would be like, okay, because you're probably at more risk of getting herpes, so then they would. But then keeping in mind that there's those false positives, false negatives.
Right.
So yeah,
That's a good summary
yeah,
for all
yeah.
that. Thank you. And maybe who knows in the future I might do maybe another more general episode on STIs too. But we'll see.
Mhm,
I just feel like this
mhm.
is conversations that need to be had that I haven't
Yes,
had on the show. So
very important. Yeah.
this one comes in from Instagram from Danny. What to do if your partner intentionally doesn't tell you they have herpes, but you find out?
Um, First, like I would say, don't freak out. Try not to freak out.
Yeah.
Um, Whenever I get people DMing me that they're like, I had sex, I didn't disclose, I feel terrible about it. That's usually what happens. Like they're not like, "Ugh, I'm not gonna tell them because like fuck them. I want to give it to them." That unless you're an asshole, like no one's doing that. Um, the main reason that they're not is because the stigma is so bad that they're so afraid to talk about it. They're afraid of getting either rejected or just being shamed, maybe being outed if it's unsafe. So I personally would respond in like a more empathetic kind of way if you can. Um, Again, I personally don't agree with not disclosing, but I understand why people are so afraid to talk about it. And that's always there whenever I get DMs, that's what they're saying. They're just like, I was just so afraid. Um,
Yeah.
so I would just have an open conversation about it and try not to judge them, honestly. Again, at the end of the day, like it's probably unlikely that that person contracted it if they weren't having an outbreak. It's yeah, it's more unlikely. Um, but yeah, I would just try to ask them about it and just become more educated about it. Because again, if you think about it, if it was in a different location, like if it was like if they had cold sores and didn't tell you, would you still feel the same way?
You're
Maybe
right.
not. And then that shows where your education is lacking
Mhm.
because it's the same thing, just a different location, and it's more stigmatized.
Yeah.
But also like they owe you an apology also.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
They should.
yeah,
And hopefully they aren't an asshole. Unfortunately, some assholes
yeah,
do exist on
yeah,
all genders.
yeah,
So, yeah. So, but
yeah.
I like that whole like, approach with the conversation type thing.
Mhm.
So thank you for
For sure,
that.
for sure.
But before we let you go, Trisha, where can we find you?
So I am on Instagram and TikTok at safe.slut. And then my backup on Instagram is at safe.slut with two T's. And then my second backup on Instagram is at safer.slut. And then Twitter is safe_slut. And then Patreon is just safe slut. YouTube, just safe slut. My website is safeslut.shop. And then my OnlyFans is at herpes.witch.
All of the things,
All the
all
social media. Yeah,
all the
everything.
social media. All of the links are in the show
Yeah.
notes below. So don't forget to give Trisha a follow, comment, all the things. She would love to hear from you, especially if you found this episode useful. Again, if you have any feedback, please let me know. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter. It's Stripped by Sia. And on Patreon, Stripped by Sia, patreon.com/Stripped by Sia, www.strippedbysia.com. You could check that out. Again, all the episodes are on there. You could pitch me if you want to be in the show, etc., etc. And the show is available on all podcast platforms. So check me out on Apple. If you want to rate 5 stars and write me a nice review, that would be awesome. Same thing with Spotify. The rating system's up there too if you truly enjoy the show. And all other things, it's everywhere. The show is everywhere. But this is such a great, insightful, and educational episode. Trisha, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. And for everyone else listening, if you enjoyed this, stay tuned for another episode coming out at you next Sunday at 12 midnight. Thanks, Trisha.
Thank you.
You're listening to Stripped by Sia, hosted, produced, and edited by Steph Sia. Music by Ted D. Graphic design by Maria Bellandarama, and photography by Ian Dabrin.